time, you need to have your passport. I don't want to scare you. Tonight, when we gather, since we're still missing 4, I don't like to do the explanations now because there's many, many questions. We have so many history that I cannot do it in 5 minutes or 10 or 2 hours or 5 hours. So I always break it. Tonight, when we meet after dinner, is when I talk a little bit about the West Bank. And what do we mean by West Bank? What is the percentage? What is Palestinian? Where the word Palestine comes from and so on. We're going to try to unfold it. It's like peeling an onion. We're going to go deeper and deeper. I don't expect you to memorize it. It took me 11 years to memorize what I have. I know how to, I always use the word injection. I'm going to inject you every day a little bit. So it's going to be like that. So you know, every place we go, you're going to might experience soldier, checkpoint, but there's no danger whatsoever. The tension is when you come to the checkpoint and you feel it. Everybody will become quiet. A soldier might get on the bus, and that's when you're really, what is going on here? But then the moment you're in, you're with locals and it's normal life. But there is borders, there are checkpoints, some might come on the bus, so you always carry your passport with you. Tonight I'll talk a bit about the Intifada, talk a bit about Oslo. What do we mean by Area A, Area B, Area C, and so on. I don't want to unfold it now because the 4 that is joining this afternoon are going to ask me the same questions. And it's very tiring to keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. But, so you know, I'm Palestinian myself. I'm Arab because I speak Arabic. And I'm Palestinian. And I was born and raised up here in Jerusalem. Married with 2 boys, and you might meet, you're going to meet them anyway. If you notice in the program, the last day when you're in Jerusalem, we're going to have you for lunch at our home in Jericho. So you'll meet my wife, Simone, and our 2 sons. But I've been a licensed tour guide for 11 years, and I've been associated with St. George's for many, many years, even before that. And I'm glad that you came. I know maybe some of your relatives say, are you crazy coming over here? Did you write your will before you came? That kind of things. And I've heard it over and over. So I thank you for coming, and I think you're going to have a wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm going to leave it for tonight. You're going to hear my voice for 10 days. I said, please, no more. Let me show you the old Roman road that most probably Jesus would have. Pisgat Ze'ev. To your left is Palestinian. To your right is Israeli Jews that live in the settlement that is built in the east side of the city. It's confusing now, but again, you're going to understand it tomorrow. Our Palestinians, they used to live in tents at the beginning in order temporarily so that they would go back to their homeland, which is Israel. And then they've been sitting here for 16 years. So now decided to build houses. Now it's nice houses, but if you go in, it marks the place, and they built a mosque with the name after. So there it is. Arafat's tomb on your right. This one here. See, that's where right there. And that's the Palestinian flag, of course. Our next stop will be the Evangelical Arab School. Yes, Arab gave the land.
A YMCA, right in the middle of this desert.
Do you think my membership will work there?
The third one, you can then, if you walk on the open area and see it, it's the Jacob ladder. When he was in the area here as well in Beit El, according to the Bible, Beit El, the house of God, Beit El, the Bible, and when he was, or he had a dream that seen a ladder and angels going up and down to heaven. So that was representing also because of the same area, just here, maybe 5 minutes by car driving. The main thing, and then the second one there, the crucifixion, Jesus on the cross, and on the arch there, the 2 small ones will be the same, the Paschal Lamb, because it's also
American community here in Jerusalem, Ramallah, on behalf of all the Palestinians, I welcome you. أهلا وسهلا, and may God bless you.
Thank you.
It's a prize on the way. Every day, one healthy little drip, baby boy. Wise men came, three made their way to shower him with love, shower him with love, love. Love is all around. Well, so I'm told, so the story goes. The people who were less than golden hearted, gamblers around the world. Drinkers and drunkards, I'm so searching for love, 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 love. Well, Jesus Christ was nailed to the street. He said, oh, Daddy,
Thank you. You're great. معلش بس بعد اذنك شوية. إمنا سلوى.
guide. I've been a guide for 11 years. After reading the Bible, and I start to link this place with that place, and that's what people come to see me for. And it just became natural. It just came to me. I'm not trying to learn it, but that's how I did it. At a site I go and I said, this would be good to read here, but why don't I add another reading here? And that's how it all developed. But that what drew me more, I think, to become more Christian. But I come from a Christian family. We're Anglicans. But you know that I was shocked when Father Dennis said yesterday, 30,000 denominations. So you can imagine how confusing it was for me when I became a guide, guiding all these Americans that are coming. The first thing he tells me, Baptist, I said, oops. I didn't know what to give to you, how to expect. What do you think? Because I had some Baptists that they were not very pleased from saying the word Palestine, for example. So, seriously. So it was to me a bit like how I'm going to get your heart or get you attracted or attention with. And that's why I was a bit worried about yesterday leaving Jerusalem, right in the heart of the West Bank, and telling you all these things. Because usually I like to talk about it a little bit by bit. Because unfortunately, after being to the United States maybe 14, 15 times now, you do not get the real picture. And it's my job, I think, to show you what you don't see back home. I know you think I'm political, but we don't golf. We talk how long it took to stay at the checkpoint and how much time we went to this place, and that's our life. So politics is part of our society. It's not the way. For LA, it's sitting on traffic. For us, we sit on checkpoints. And that's how I like to explain it, especially for LA people. After being there, and I'm driving on Highway 4, I think, and stuck there for 2-3 hours, and so that's what it, but it's my chance to give you things, or show you things, that you're going to say, is this really going on here? Because the media is so much controlled that it's just unbelievable. I'm getting phone calls from, yesterday it was, wishing me Merry Christmas, are you safe? And I say, why? And it was a group from Grace Cathedral a month ago. Nothing has changed. It's the same. And they had a great experience and they left home, but they're still worried about us. And I don't know where they get the media and what kind of news they listen to. But the situation like this, it was like this when Father Dennis came in 2004. Maybe there was some incidents here and there, but every time you show it on TV, you think the whole country is in war. So for the first timers, because yesterday we went to Ramallah. Now for you, you have to have your passport all the time because we go through checkpoints. And you're going to experience that today when we go to Bethlehem. But I want you to remember that. I know if you talk about this program, if it's balanced, it's not balanced. I know for sure. We got you an Israeli perspective. We got you a Muslim one. Tomorrow is going to be with us. But it's mainly from a Palestinian Christian perspective, I think. Because yesterday you've been with the bishop, you've been with father, you've been to the institutions, and you hear it from a Christian point of view. And I think that's what really made me stay here and to give or educate people of what's really going on. I'm hoping our sons, you're going to meet tonight, will go to study in your country in order that they come back. I know it's a beautiful country, lots of opportunities, and the only condition I put on for my boys is that you come back. This is home. It's not the United States. And I hope that they will do that. And so this is what we're trying to show you for the next 7 days while you're here in Jerusalem. I'm married with 2 boys. You're going to meet my wife Simone, and they're coming to join you to Bethlehem tonight. And we have 2 sons. One's named Sammy, he's the oldest. He's 16 years old. And Rami is the youngest. He's going to be 15 on January 1st. I think that's about it for now. What I want to do is, I need your departure. And so before you leave this room, I'm going to put a sheet right here, and I want to get everybody's departure, please. Because I want to take the time to talk a little more about, because the weather is going to change. According to the weather people. Of course, you don't trust them, but they seem they're doing good these days. They say there's going to be rain, and it says non-stop rain until Thursday evening, so that's not good. So I'm going to do as much as we can to leave here maybe in an hour, and this gets you oriented. And then go Mount of Olives or Mount Scopus, and from the geographical point of view, show you the desert, show you Jerusalem, talk about the valleys, and so on. Everybody got the program, right?
Yes.
I have more copies, but try not to lose them, you know? But that would be basically what it is. Father Dennis and Lynn will be the first one to know if there's any changes, all right? So if you want something to be added, I think if you talk to Father Dennis, and in a way we might find a place that we can put it on the program or the question sometimes comes to me and say, I'm going to do it a different way. Once I was in LA and they took me to a very old neighborhood. And I said, how old is it? They told me it was 1884.
That's very old in LA.
This is new. We have a gate called the New Gate in the walls of the city, and it was opened in 1884, so we call it the New Gate. So you can imagine of what history we have. I didn't do much explanation yesterday when I took the group on a walk, because you were not with us, and I wanted so that you all share the same experience. But what Father Dennis studied yesterday with the feet, remember there's 15 to 20 feet? What you think of Jerusalem, it's a living tell. You know what the tell is? Tell is a man-made mountain. And it's one civilization that is built on top of the other. And that's what excites you, people, to come over and visit. And that's what I would like to reveal to you now. And usually I like to make you memorize 3 periods before I get into the political point of view. But so you know, Jerusalem is a living tell. Every time we walk at a place, I will say, remember, it's about 20 feet under that goes back to Jesus' time. And if we say Jesus, it's Roman period, right? We know that the Romans came here in 63 BC by Pompey, built the 10 Decapolis cities. And one people didn't get it. Anyway, there's only one city called Beit Sha'an. It's in the west of Jordan. The rest would be in Jordan. And we know that the occupation of the Romans were here until 300, or we can say 614, which is the Persians. But I'm going to break these periods. But I want to tell you a little bit about Kathleen Kenyon. She's a famous British archaeologist. Maybe some of you heard about her. And she did lots of excavations. One of them is in Jericho. She found a tower in Jericho that she dates to 8,000 BC. That's old. That's 10,000 years old. It's not 1884. I don't know where you come from other places in the United States. But that's how history builds up in this country. I don't expect you to memorize everything I'm going to share. That's why I like to break it. It took me years and years to memorize it. And I think what made me successful is I'm good in numbers. If you're good in numbers, you can be a good guide. Because the moment you memorize and you put the dates here, then you start to put everything in between. So 8,000, you talk about 10,000 years old. If I took you to Tel, like Tel Beit Sha'an, I can take you to a gate that goes back to 3,500 BC. Imagine Canaanite gate, 5,500 years old. And you're actually walking on a street that goes back from that period. You know, when you go to that hill and then you walk through a tunnel that is dug by King Ahab, and you go, wow, Ahab, 9th century BC. So now my question to you, who was the first king for the Israelites, for the Jewish people? Saul. And so the first thing I'm going to talk, when we leave here, we're going to go up to Mount Scopus. I'm going to say to you, where did Saul reign? Where did he reign, you know? You can have a test at the end, you know? On the 30th, there's a test. It was Gibeon. And so the moment we stand right there, I'm going to tell you, look, and right behind that mound, that's where Gibeon is, and that's where Saul reigned. I'm going to talk about all these places that are going to come alive to you. We know that Saul was anointed, King David was anointed by Samuel, right? And so today we'll be talking about, we'll be actually doing the readings right there. I hope the weather won't change. But I'm going to take you to a field and talk about David, you know, being anointed. Then talk about the city of David. And before that, if you talk about Elimelech, Naomi, with her daughter-in-law Ruth, and Ruth meeting Boaz and all that, you're going to see all this, you know, it's going to come alive to you. We're going to go to the shepherd's field. I'm going to show you where Jesus was born. And that's what we're going to do this morning or this afternoon before we go tonight. Because tonight will be more spiritual. I cannot take you at night. We're at Christmas Eve and I'm telling you Byzantine and Crusader and this wall is this and this wall is that. So that's why I'm going to try to do it today, to reveal it. But if we talk about David, we talk about 1000 BC. We know that his son built the first temple, right? And that was in 970 BC. He brought the cedar wood from Lebanon to Jaffa. And I mentioned it yesterday, instead of Ben Gurion, it was called Jaffa. And from Jaffa came up to Jerusalem, and he built the first temple. Who destroyed the first temple?
The Romans.
It was Nebuchadnezzar, if you remember? 586. The Jews were pushed out from this country to Babylon, which is Iraq, right? Then they came back. So the first temple, who built it? King Solomon. And all this is going to come alive when we go to the Western Wall. I'm going to talk about these places. Oh, the Western Wall. It's the wall that was built by Herod. Herod never built temples. Everybody comes to me and says, so where is the temple that was built by Herod? Remember, the first temple was destroyed when? 586 BC. The Jews came back 65 years later. And so we know that Nehemiah is the one that built the second temple. So remember how far the second temple was built. When we talk about Herod, it's Roman. Right? I'm going to go straight from Nehemiah all the way to the Roman period. I know there's so many in between, Persians and there's Egyptians, there's so many things. But that's when you get so confused, and I don't want to do that. So we talk about the Romans. Why Roman? Because this is important for us. We talk about the temple that was, or the platform that was expanded by Herod the Great, and that's what you'll be actually visiting. When I tell you this is the Western Wall, which is a retaining wall that Herod the Great had built. And Herod reigned between 37 BC until 4 BC. And we'll be talking about this as we go on. You're going to hear me talk about a Jewish historian. His name is Josephus Flavius. A very famous historian that wrote a book, and that's what all the archaeologists go to. According to Josephus, Herod the Great died in Jericho. He's buried at Herodium. So today I'm going to show you where Herodium is. And so some say they found Herod's tomb, or the ossuary, or the sarcophagus. And so all these things are going to come alive. Do you know when the first Jewish revolt took place? Against Rome? In 66 AD. And the spark that ignited that revolt happened in Caesarea. Caesarea is right by the sea. And the last day, some of you are going to go there. Caesarea is right here, right on the sea. I don't know if you read a book called The Last Week. It's written by Marcus Borg, and I highly recommend it. He talks about how the troops coming from this side, because Pontius Pilate was reigning right up here, and the troops coming up to Jerusalem. Here's Jerusalem. And Jesus is coming with his disciples from the east. So he talks about the peaceful procession with the Palm Sunday versus the power that's coming from the west, which is Pontius Pilate with all these troops coming from Caesarea Maritima. So that's a book for you to read, and I think that will become. So today, when we go to Mount Scopus, and I hope the weather will be good, I'll be talking about this. Picture Jesus coming up with the disciples, peaceful procession, versus the power and the force, which is by Pontius Pilate coming from Caesarea up to here. Can I turn this off? Because I'm going to avoid it. So the Jews rebel against Rome, and that's where the spark took place, in Caesarea Maritima. And that's where the first baptism took place. It's mentioned in the book of Acts 11, where Cornelius being called. Remember when he called Peter, and he was baptized by him? That took place in Caesarea. And so that was the capital of Palestine for almost 500 years. It was not Jerusalem. Caesarea was the most important place, which was built way before by Herod the Great. So imagine to dry cement underwater 2,000 years ago. That tells you of what kind of structure or builders you had, engineers 2,000 years ago. And that's what we're going to show you when we go to Masada. I'll be talking about Herod the Great, because we show you the bathhouse with the rooms, the tepidarium, frigidarium, caldarium, and so on. And then show you the palaces that Herod built, show you the storage rooms, and this will become more to see, talk about Herod the Great. So in year 70 AD, That ended up by the destruction of the temple. And again, why I give so much to talk about this temple, it's the same temple. Today we're going to talk about it. After Jesus was born, Joseph and Mary took baby Jesus to represent him at the temple. Remember, it's mentioned in Luke. So we're going to do that reading. So I'm going to give you the distance, which way they would have walked, taking baby Jesus to the temple. Where was the temple? What do we have here where the temple used to be? It's a place called the Dome of the Rock, or Al-Aqsa Mosque. And tomorrow we'll be going there. Ali Klebo, which you had dinner with, he's going to be your guide, and he's going to show you that. In the year 70, the temple was destroyed. And it was never rebuilt again. And the one that destroyed it is named Titus. So 70 is a very important date for you to memorize. 65 years after, 135, that's a very, very important date. 135 AD, the Jews rebelled against mighty Rome for the second time. And so they were led by Bar Kokhba, the leader, and that revolt was crushed by a Roman emperor named Hadrian. And so Hadrian names the country Philistia, after who? Right here, there were people called the Philistines. There were sea people. They were camped in the 5 cities of the Philistines. Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gath. Famous cities. Philistines. Versus the Canaanites. So the Philistines were down at the coastal plain. That's where you landed. This is where you came up, where the Shephelah, the mountains, and so on. Canaanites were right up here. So today I'll be talking a bit about the Canaanite city. Remember the Jebusites, Canaanites, Yebus, and so Melchizedek, and so on. So I'll be talking about where was the city of David by showing you the 2 valleys, Tyropian Valley, Kidron Valley. And this is how we start from there, from David. But so you know, Philistia is named after the Philistines, and that's where the word Palestine comes from. So the country was called Palestine since Hadrian's time in 135 AD. From Philistia, Philistines, Palestine. And that's where the word comes. In other words, since 135 there was no such word as Israel. When Israel was founded?
45, 48.
That's when the Israelis came. That's when the Jews came back. And so the country was named Palestine. I'm Palestinian because my ancestors come from here. And that's how we identify ourselves. So I'm Arab because I speak Arabic. Not you. At home, our mother tongue at home is Arab. And remember yesterday, for the ones that wasn't here, who were not here, Father Nile said it to you. If you go to Indonesia, it's the largest Muslim country. Do they speak Arabic? They're not Arabs, but they're Muslims. So Arab, because we speak Arabic. If you go to the book of Acts, I don't have my Bible here, the Arabs were here. You know, when the Holy Spirit came down, if you go back and you read, the Arabs were here 2,000 years ago, way before Islam even was founded. So that's why I call myself Arab. I'm Palestinian because I come from Palestine, and I'm Christian. Now I'm Episcopalian. This is a modern religion compared to the 30,000 denominations, which really shocked me yesterday when you said that. 30,000 denominations. Everybody in your country would go and do another church. It's just, for me, so confusing. But how do we become Anglicans, for example? My grandfather was Greek Orthodox. That was the religion. But everybody has his own story. Our story, that my grandpa wanted to marry my grandma, but they were close relatives. So the Greeks said, we cannot marry you. The Anglicans said, please come, we'll marry you. And that's how we became Anglicans. But that's how it comes, you know. If you go back to the roots, it is. And so when the missionaries came in 1840s, instead of converting the Jews, guess what they did? They divided the church. So that's why when we go on Sunday for the Baptist church, there's hardly any there. It's a very modern, compared to the Greek Orthodox or Armenian or Assyriac or Catholic even, you know. But that's how when we go to the Holy Sepulchre. Imagine 6 denominations that live under one roof. can imagine the fighting. Maybe you heard about it a month ago. Did you see it on the news? When you see monks in robes and fist fighting? It's fun, no? So the Greek Orthodox versus the Armenians. Because I think one lit a candle or they did something wrong and they were fighting. Because they did something that he was not supposed to do. But that's what kind of religion we have here. So when I tell you Christian, it doesn't mean it's born again. It took me a while for me to understand when someone comes to me and say, when did you become Christian? We're here way before you had Christianity. And so when I tell you that the percentage of Christians is going down, it's the Arab community. So you have the largest denomination is Greek Orthodox. Second comes it's Catholics. And then we have the Anglicans, Lutherans, Baptists, and so on. Today we number 1.5%. Bethlehem in 1922 to 1947 used to be 90% Christian. Today the district of Bethlehem has 135,000 people. Bethlehem, the city, has 40,000 people. Among them are 70% Muslim versus 30% Christian. Because in 1948 there was a war. Israel was created, remember? So it dropped to 60%. 1967 it dropped to 30%. And today when you hear about 60 Christian families leaving Bethlehem, that's a lot of people, if you think about it. It's from both sides are leaving, Palestinian, Muslim, and Christian. But why it's so obvious with the Christians? Because we're minorities. So when you hear about 60 families left, you know exactly what's happening. And unfortunately, Bethlehem today is surrounded by a circle, and that's what's called a wall that Israel built. And I'm going to come to it soon. So in the West Bank, this is the West Bank, and this is Gaza Strip. Between Gaza Strip and the West Bank, there's about 3.6 million people. 98% are Muslim. 98. Less than 2% are Christian. And this is what I told you about the Christianity. In Israel, this is behind the black line, there's 80% Jewish versus 18% Muslim and about 2% Christian. Why Christians stay in Israel? It's different. There's no wall, there's no checkpoints. They have a nationality, they carry the Israeli passport, they travel around freely, nobody stops them, so they don't immigrate or they don't leave the country. And one of them you met yesterday, Father Na'al. Na'al comes from Shafa'amr. Here's Nazareth. Right next to Nazareth, there's a town called Shafa'amr. And so that's where he comes from. So, in 1948, the creation of the State of Israel, for the Jewish people, let me just go back a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question. When do you think the Arab-Israeli conflict began? Grandma?
No, when did the Arabs?
Arab-Israeli conflict began.
1917.
1917. You're almost there. It was 1897. What took place in 1897 is that you heard of a man named Theodor Herzl? Mm-hmm. Theodor Herzl is the founder of what's called the Zionist movement. And he comes from Basel, Switzerland. He's the one that said, let's bring the Jews back from the land, from diaspora, or from all over the world. When were the Jews pushed out from the country? 135 AD by Hadrian, remember? It was called Palestine up here. The Jews were pushed out in 135 AD, and they were not allowed to come back to this country until 1948. And so Theodor Herzl is the one that came with an idea, let's bring the Jews from the land, from diaspora, to the land of Zion, which is the biblical name of Jerusalem. And so I'm going to show you where do they talk about Zion. And I'm going to talk about how holy places move in the Holy Land, because we have a new Mount Zion today. And so the conflict really began right there. That's when the Jews started to come back. They started to buy property, living in what's called kibbutzim, and some of you asked me about kibbutz. 1910, the first kibbutz named Digania, they started farming the land, living in communities, and that's when the Arabs realized what's happening. And then Balfour Declaration comes in 1915, and that's how, or 1917, and on and on and on. Because we know that the British were here, and they're the ones that supported that idea to bring the Jews back to Palestine or to Zion. Yeah.
What did the Balfour Agreement say?
The Balfour, that they would bring the Jews back to Palestine, or that would support the immigration or the creation of the Zionist state, which is in Palestine.
Okay.
Even what Theodore Herzl quoted is a land with no people.
Well, isn't it important that just quickly that the British had control over Palestine at that time?
At that time, 1917, yeah. He quoted a people without a land, referring to the Jews all over the world, for land without people. How did I say it? Say it wrong.
No, that's right.
No, that's right.
Yeah. So, but remember that Theodore Herzl never came to Palestine, and guess what? There were people living here called Palestinians, and that's when the Arab-Israeli conflict began. And then in 1948, for the Jews, they call it a victory day. For the Palestinians,
There were Palestinians living here. Were they all Christian? Were they Muslim? What were
both. They were Jews, Christian, Muslim, but Jews were minority. There were Jews always living here, all the time. And they had good relationships, believe it or not. If you go to Morocco, it's an Arab country. And to this day, the Moroccan Jews live there and they're happy. They don't want to leave even. But it's politics what makes things go bad, you know? Moroccan Jews, they love their king there. And he supported the Jewish people. But it's amazing how politics comes in. There were always Jews. My grandpa had a Jewish neighbor. He said they lived happy. But it's the Zionist, it's occupation, it's on. And that's where I'm going to get to now. And that's when you start really understand why the hatred built up. So, for the Jewish people, it's a great day. It's a victory day, right? They have their independent state. But for Palestinians, they call it catastrophe day. Yom al-Nakba. And that's when the Palestinians were in disperse. Today there's 9 million Palestinians, remember? But only 3 million that live here. The rest are living where? Refugee camps and elsewhere. So, in 1948, this was called Palestine. The UN decided to split Palestine into two. The Palestinians were offered much more of what you see now. But I don't want to take it too long. But, so picture behind the black line is Israel, and what's here is West Bank, right? 1948, Jordan took possession of this part. So this part was under Jordanian jurisdiction from 1948 to 1967. So far, so good. Egypt.
They took that, the UN agreed to that, or did they take that through military action?
It was, I would say, military, if you think about this, because it's all part of the British mandate, if you remember, and also the French. The French took Lebanon and Syria and so on. So that's, every country was divided, you know.
And was it contiguous? Is Jordan right at the
Yeah.
border?
No, Jordan was here, but then Jordan became all of this area from 1948 to 67.
Okay, so that was just an extension of the Jordanian boundary
Yes.
line. It
Yes.
wasn't like there's Jordan and some land and then this
No.
pocket.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Then Egypt,
Okay, just one quick question. They use the term Transjordan.
Transjordan.
Is that what that is?
That's it, yes. So now, let's go to Gaza. Gaza, Palestinians, remember, they fled, they had to leave. Some were forced to leave, some were scared, they left, and some stayed. One of them you met yesterday named Na'al, remember? And he said, my family went to Lebanon. There's Lebanon, it's north. That's the closest way to Shafar Aman, for example. So remember when he said this story, that they went and they came back from Lebanon and that's how they stayed? Some of them still live to this day in what's called refugee camps. So from 1948 to 2008, they're still waiting. And they live in camps in southern Lebanon. Some went to Syria. Some went into the West Bank. Some went into Gaza. But who is in possession of Gaza? It was Egypt. So Egypt was in control of Gaza. So far so good. 1967, to make it shorter. There was a war called the 6 Day War. And that's when Israel won. All the Arab countries lost. Syria lost what's called the Golan Heights, which is the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Remember, in 1967, this was Syria. The eastern shore of the lake was Syria. So, Israel won, Syria lost. The Golan Heights were taken by Israel. Jordan lost the West Bank. Egypt lost Gaza and Sinai. So far, so good? Now,
Well, what precipitated the Six-Day War?
the aggressor on that?
I mean, everybody tells you a different story. The Jews were not allowed to come to the Western Wall to pray. This is war, because this was supposed to be Palestine. All the Arab countries united to go against Israel, and that's how they ended up by being defeated.
At the time, Jerusalem was that a divided city?
Yeah. Jerusalem had two parts, east and west.
Yes.
So the east side was Jordan, and the west side was Israel. Where was I?
No, you were talking about the Six-Day War. So the Jews decided we're going to attack these several different spots. It was a surprise attack, and they won those all back from the Arab countries.
Everybody tells a different story, you know, so you have to go and, depends on what book. The more you read, the more confusing it gets, you know. But I would say maybe the Arab world decided. And also don't forget that Jerusalem is important for the Jews. They were not allowed to go and pray, because part of the agreement was that they have a convoy that will take Jews to pray at the Western Wall. So, I mean, I have to be honest by both things. And so many things were not implemented. So maybe that's one of the things that ignited it, you know. So, but anyway, it ended up by the defeat of the Arab world, right? We can go in depth with those later, you know, but I just want you to get the clear picture. In the early 70s, that's when the Israelis decided to invest by building settlements in the West Bank. And that's what you really have to understand what's going on. So the West Bank is this area, right? So they started to build settlements all over the West Bank. Those are illegal settlements that Palestinians are fighting to stop building. I'm going to talk later about how many settlers live in the West Bank today and what does it mean for a settler to live there. Okay? Now let's move on to 1987. 1987, a van was carrying Palestinian laborers from Gaza that were working in Israel. And the jeep went over that van, killing 5 Palestinian workers, I think, or 7, I forgot the number. But that's what sparked what's called Intifada. Intifada is the uprising. That was in 1987. And it spread from Gaza all over the West Bank. They're against occupation. How did they show anger? By burning tires, throwing stones on cars, and you never heard about it because there were no suicide bombers. But in 1987, I was stoned myself, right here, came through the windshield, because I carry a yellow license plate. This is new for you because you were not with the system. There's 2 colors for license plates. Yellow means Jerusalem, Israel. The West Bank has white and green. And so I was driving in the West Bank, nice van, the bishop's van, is being accurate. And they thought I was a settler, so they threw a stone. It came through the windshield, right in my face. That's what the Intifada did. The Intifada ended in 1993. You've heard of Yasser Arafat, right? You've heard of Yitzhak Rabin. He was the prime minister at that time. Secret talks was taking place in what's called Oslo. They signed what's called Oslo Agreement. So let's stop the Intifada that took place in 1987. In 1993, they signed Oslo Agreement. So Intifada is over. Palestinian, PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, the name was changed to PNA, Palestinian National Authority. And they came in the West Bank in order to, Oslo says, we want to have a Palestinian state right next to the state of Israel. So far so good, but look how stupid it becomes. They divided the West Bank into 3 areas. This is how confusing it's getting now. Area A means when Oslo was signed, we're gonna give you gradually to self-rule, to be independent by self-ruling,
Self-determination.
Self-determination, yeah. And so they decided by giving only the city. So look at this. See here it says, here's Hebron, it's Bethlehem, it's Jericho, this is Ramallah where we were yesterday, This is Nablus, this is Jenin, this is Tulkarm, and Qalqilia. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
That's Area A. It's major cities. So, Palestinians moved in with some troops. Oslo was signed. Arafat comes in. His base was in Ramallah, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Oslo says Area A is totally under Palestinian control. So the city now is controlled by the Palestinians. Israel pulled out from the city itself only. Are you with me? Now, between the city, there are villages and towns. Those, they numbered it or put it in what's called Area B, which means it's administrative by the PNA, but security is under Israeli control. Then Area C is all of the West Bank that is left behind. So far, are you with me? Now, remember what I told you in the early 70s? What did Israel do? They start to build settlements right here. So the way I want you to think of the West Bank, I want you to look at the West Bank as if it's a sea, and the settlements that are inside, or let's say, not the settlements, the cities that you see those circles? Picture them islands. Or if you have a Swiss cheese, remember all these holes in? That's what's happening. Now, who controls outside the Swiss cheese or the islands? It's Israel. And that's what drove the Palestinians more and more crazy. Oslo was never implemented. Oslo said that there will be a viable Palestinian state next to the state of Israel with a safe passage from Gaza to the West Bank. So picture a road that would be connecting Gaza with Palestine. You would have a port here. You would have international airport. People can commute between the West Bank, Gaza, and to the world. That's what Oslo was based on. But unfortunately, there's no leaders that have the courage to do it. The only one that had the courage to sign the peace treaty, believe it or not, was assassinated. And his name was Yitzhak Rabin, and he was the Israeli prime minister. In 1967, imagine he's the one that fought to occupy or to get the West Bank, but he was willing to sit and negotiate and give back the West Bank. But what happened to him? He was shot by a Jew, remember? And that's what destroyed Oslo. And it was never implemented. Who came in power? It's Netanyahu. Then you got Sharon, and on, and it was never. So, Palestinians, instead of negotiating, they turned to power. And what happened? Oslo fell down, suicide bombers. Sharon knew by going to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which you're going to go to visit tomorrow, excuse me, and in October 2000, he took a couple hundred of his men to Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is a very important site for the Muslims. He ignited what's called the Second Intifada, and that was it. From 2000 until 2004, I was sitting home. Why? Because no one was coming. Sorry to use the expression or to give it as an example. Imagine to have September 11 almost every week. Remember how you felt? I was in Texas when September 11 happened. I know exactly how Americans acted. I was there. You can imagine me, as Palestinians, in Texas, how I felt when that happened. But every week, there was some crazy lunatic went and bombed himself and suicide. And that's why the Second Intifada, the world heard about it, because it was violent. And so suicide bombers, Israel decided to build a wall. Enough is enough. I don't need those workers that come and work in our country. I want to divide them. And that's what they misled the world. It's amazing how powerful Israel and the Jewish people were with that. Because everybody like you sitting here, or anyone in the world, it's their right to have security. Right? Now, if you want to give security to your people that live in Israel, where would you put the wall? You have to put the wall right over here, right? In 2000, October 2000. And that's helpful for you to know, because you're going to hear people say, oh, but I live in Area B, and for you some go, what is Area B? I cannot understand this. What is Area C, and what is Area A? Now you understand what I'm talking about. Any questions?
Yes. Area B was the villages and smaller towns outside?
Yeah,
And then
outside.
Area C was what?
Totally under Israeli control. So the West Bank, where the settlers are and so on, it's all in the West Bank. But so you know, this part and this part makes 22% of prehistoric Palestine. This was called Palestine, remember? So this one is 22% versus 78%, which is today called Israel.
So, just to make sure we understand this, the two areas encircled in black are where the Palestinians are, and there's.
Now to make it easy, so that you know it's confusing. So today we go to Bethlehem.
Right.
Where is Bethlehem?
In the,
It's right here. Here's Jerusalem. This is Bethlehem.
they're in the Palestinian area.
Yes. So Bethlehem has 4 checkpoints around it. So today we go the main one. They turn me back, I use the other one. They turn me back, I use the other one. Eventually we get in. So you know? But for Bethlehemites, they have a wall around. If it's not a wall, it's a fence. So far so good?
Mm-hmm.
For a Bethlehemite that was born here and been living here for 2,000 years, cannot come to Jerusalem because he needs a permit. Now who gives the permit?
He can't get out.
He can't,
leave.
no, he can now, because it's quiet, he can travel within the West Bank, but he cannot travel with his car. So you need permits, even in the West Bank, to go. See how confusing it is? But to come to Jerusalem, it's out of the question. You need a very special permit that's issued by Israel. You have to be married with children, so. But so imagine workers that have been working in Israel, depending on a living for 60 years, for a sudden you come and say, I don't trust you, you cannot come into my country. And that's what unemployment goes high and high and high.
And then, so, and within that, the West Bank area, the Jews have established 6 settlements, and they're,
Oh, there's, you know, I forgot the number of settlements, but it's over 200 settlements.
okay, and those are the ones that are building the walls around, and even the Palestinians that are within the Jewish settlement areas, those are the people harmed the most, because they need special permits to
Yes.
go in and out.
Yes. Now, I know it's too political now. I will be today talking a bit so that you can understand it better, get a better picture. Tomorrow, for me, it's over. Then we go back to biblical things. But the reason I like to do it, I don't want it to be a shock for you to see a soldier with gun, because it happens that they might come on the bus. And so you understand when we leave Jerusalem, go into the West Bank, I'm going to make you go down and touch the wall and take a picture of the wall. It's 27 feet. And then you make your own mind. I'm not trying to make you pro somebody, okay? I'm trying to educate you of things that you never get back home, okay? I'm going to make this clear again. But that's the only way to do it. I know it's not good to do it the first day, but unfortunately I have to do this. But as we move on, then we start, it goes back to biblical, and then, but we always tell people, remember even during Roman times, Joseph and Mary had to go through checkpoints. Yeah, there was Romans here, but maybe there was no wall, but that's how to think about it.
Is Jerusalem an area B?
No, that's the whole thing by itself. Imagine what I talked about, all this. Jerusalem is another thing. How it's going to be solved, we don't know. East side, is it going to be international? Is it going to be controlled by the PNA? Which area? I mean, it's
But it is in the West Bank.
it's part of the West Bank, if you really think about it. Yeah.
Can you show where the Jordan River is on the
Yeah,
map?
here's the Jordan River. That leaves the Sea of Galilee, comes down to the Dead Sea. So East Bank is Jordan, West Bank is this area. That's why we call it the West Bank. It's West Bank, the Jordan River. One is in 2000, October 2000. And that's helpful for you to know, because you're going to hear people say, oh, but I live in Area B. And for you, some go, what is Area B? I cannot understand this. What is Area C? And what is Area A? Now you understand what we're talking about. Any questions?
Yes. Area B was the villages and smaller towns outside?
Yeah,
And then
outside.
Area C was what?
Totally under Israeli control. So the West Bank, where the settlers are and so on, it's all in the West Bank. But so you know, this part and this part makes 22% of prehistoric Palestine. This was called Palestine, remember? So this one is 22% versus 78%, which is today called Israel.
So, just to make sure we understand this, the two areas encircled in black are where the Palestinians are, and there's.
Now to make it easy, so that you know it's confusing. So today we go to Bethlehem.
Right.
Where is Bethlehem?
In the,
It's right here. Here's Jerusalem. This is Bethlehem.
they're in the Palestinian area.
Yes. So Bethlehem has 4 checkpoints around it. So today we go the main one. They turn me back, I use the other one. They turn me back, I use the other one. Eventually we get in. So you know? But for Bethlehemites, they have a wall around. If it's not a wall, it's a fence. So far so good? For a Bethlehemite that was born here and been living here for 2,000 years, cannot come to Jerusalem because he needs a permit. Now who gives the permit?
He can't get out.
He can't, no, he can now, because it's quiet, he can travel within the West Bank, but he cannot travel with his car. So you need permits even in the West Bank to go. See how confusing it is? But to come to Jerusalem, it's out of the question. You need a very special permit that's issued by Israel. You have to be married with children, so. But so imagine workers that have been working in Israel, depending on a living for 60 years, for a sudden you come and say, I don't trust you, you cannot come into my country. And that's what unemployment goes high and high and high.
And then, so, and within that, the West Bank area, the Jews have established 6 settlements, and they're.
Oh, there's, you know, I forgot the number of settlements, but it's over 200 settlements.
Okay, and those are the ones that are building the walls around, and even the Palestinians that are within the Jewish settlement areas, those are the people harmed the most, because they need special permits to go in and out.
Yes. Now, I know it's too political now. I will be today talking a bit so that you can understand it better, get a better picture. Tomorrow, for me, it's over. Then we go back to biblical things. But the reason I like to do it, I don't want it to be a shock for you to see a soldier with a gun, because it happens that they might come on the bus. And so you'll understand when we leave Jerusalem and go into the West Bank, I'm going to make you go down and touch the wall and take a picture of the wall. It's 27 feet. And then you make your own mind. I'm not trying to make you pro somebody, okay? I'm trying to educate you of things that you never get back home, okay? I'm going to make this clear again. But that's the only way to do it. I know it's not good to do it the first day, but unfortunately I have to do this. But as we move on, then we start, it goes back to biblical, and then, but we always tell people, remember even during Roman times, Joseph and Mary had to go through checkpoints. Yeah, there was Romans here, but maybe there was no wall, but that's how to think about it.
Is Jerusalem an area B?
No, that's another whole thing by itself. Imagine what I talked about, all this. Jerusalem is another thing. How it's going to be solved, we don't know. East side, is it going to be international? Is it going to be controlled by the PNA? Which area? I mean, it's.
But it is in the West Bank.
It's part of the West Bank,
Yeah.
if you really think about it. Yeah.
Can you show where the Jordan River is on the
Yeah,
map?
here's the Jordan River. That leaves the Sea of Galilee, comes down to the Dead Sea. So East Bank is Jordan, West Bank is this area. That's why we call it the West Bank. It's west of the Jordan River. I think let's get advantage of the weather.